Let's be real. We've all stared down a challenge that felt like it was laughing at us. Maybe it was a job that pushed you to the edge, a dream that felt too big to reach, or a fear that kept you up at 3 a.m., overthinking every step. That's exactly where Nynaeve Almira starts, and let me tell you, her journey from a stubborn village, wisdom in the two rivers, to someone who wields the one power like it owes her a favor. It's not just fantasy fluff. It's a masterclass in what happens when you refuse to let impossible write your story. If you know the Wheel of Time, you remember Nynaeve's first brush with the one power. She's kicking and screaming against it, convinced Moiraine is some kind of trickster, and that her only job is to protect her people. No fancy magic required. Sound familiar? How many times have we pushed back against something we didn't understand, something that scared us, because we thought sticking to what we know was safer? Nynaeve's got that in spades. She's the kind of person who'd heal a stranger's fever at dawn and argue with a queen by noon. Prideful, fierce, and so stubborn she'd sooner walk through a blizzard barefoot than admit she needs help. But here's the thing about stubbornness. When it's paired with heart, it becomes resilience. And Nynaeve's got heart for days. Let's talk about our lowest point, because we've all been there too. Imagine training with Aes Sedai in Tarvalon, the cream of the crop of magic wielders, and every time you try to channel the one power, it slips through your fingers like smoke. They tell you you're too emotional, too hot-headed, that your anger is a weakness. They say you'll never master it, not the way they do. How do you keep going when the experts are writing you off? Nynaeve doesn't just grit her teeth and push through. She fights like someone who has everything to lose. Because she does. Her friends, Rand, Mat, Perrin, are out there tangled in prophecies and dark forces, and she's not about to let a little thing like not being good enough stop her from protecting them. Here's where the magic, pun, absolutely intended happens. Nynaeve doesn't try to be like the other Aes Sedai. She doesn't suppress her anger or her passion. She leans into it. Remember when she's facing off against moiraine, one of the Forsaken, a villain who's been playing with power for centuries? Everyone else would freeze up, but Nynaeve, she gets mad. Like, you hurt my friends, so I'm going to channel enough one power to shake the earth. Mad. And it works. Her anger isn't a weakness. It's her fuel. It's a reminder that our so-called flaws often hold our greatest strength. Have you ever been told you're too much, too passionate, too stubborn, too invested? Nynaeve turns that too much into a superpower. She proves that you don't have to fit into someone else's mold to be extraordinary. But let's not pretend it's all epic battles and power surges. Nynaeve's journey is messy. She doubts herself constantly. She cries when she fails. Bush, she yells at the sky when the Wheel of Time spins her in a direction she doesn't want to go. Once, after a brutal fight where she nearly lost control of the one power and hurt someone she loved, she sat alone in a barn and questioned if she was even meant to do this. Sound relatable? Who hasn't wanted to quit when the cost feels too high? But what sets Nynaeve apart isn't that she never doubts. It's that she keeps going even when she does. She picks herself up, wipes the dirt off her dress and says, "Okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else." That's resilience, plain and simple. It's not about being fearless, it's about being scared and taking the next step anyway. Let's circle back to the one power, because it's not just a magic system, it's a metaphor for the things we're all trying to master. For some of us, it's a new skill, a difficult relationship, or a personal goal that feels out of reach. Nynaeve's struggle to channel is our struggle to grow. It's messy, it's frustrating, and it requires us to confront parts of ourselves we might not like. She has to learn to trust herself, to stop looking for validation from the Aes Sedai or anyone else, and listen to the voice inside that says, "You can do this." How many of us are waiting for someone else to give us permission to be great? Nynaeve gives it to herself. She says, "I don't care what you think. I'm going to protect my people, and I'm going to do it my way." And let's not forget the people who stand with her, because no one does this alone. Moiraine, who sees her potential even when Nynaeve can't. Egwene, her childhood friend who becomes her rival and her greatest cheerleader. Lan, the quiet warder who loves her for her fire, not in spite of it. They're the ones who remind her who she is when she's lost. They're the ones who hand her a cup of tea after a defeat and say, "Try again tomorrow." We all need people like that. People who see our strength even when we're blind to it. Nynaeve's journey isn't just about her. It's about the power of community, of having people who will fight with you, not just for you. Now, let's talk about her breakthrough, the moment everything clicks. It's not at a grand battle or a fancy ceremony. It's in a quiet room where she's facing down her own fear of failure. She stops trying to channel like the Aes Sedai. She stops fighting her emotions. She embraces who she is, stubborn, passionate, loyal to a fault, and lets that guide her. And suddenly, the one power flows through her like it's been waiting for her to stop resisting. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated self-acceptance. How many of us are holding back because we're trying to be someone we're not? Nynaeve's breakthrough teaches us that the key to mastering anything, whether it's magic or life, is to be unapologetically yourself. Here's the thing about Nynaeve's journey. It's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent. It's about falling down 10 times and getting up 11. It's about looking at a challenge that feels impossible and saying, watch me. We've all got our own version of the one power, something that scares us, something that feels out of reach, something that requires us to grow in ways we never imagined. Nynaeve's story isn't just about saving the world. It's about saving yourself. It's about realizing that you're stronger than you think, that your flaws are your strengths, and that the only person who can stop you is you. So the next time you're staring down a challenge that feels too big, think of Nynaeve. Think of the village wisdom who refused to back down. Think of the woman who turned her anger into power, her doubt into drive, and her stubbornness into resilience. Think of her sitting in that barn, crying after a defeat, then standing up and trying again, because that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be brave. Her epic struggle to master the one power isn't just a fantasy storyline. It's a mirror. It reflects our own struggles, our own fears, and our own capacity for growth. It reminds us that impossible is just a word, and that the greatest power we have is the courage to keep going, even when the odds are stacked against us. So join us as we dive into Nynaeve's world, not just to watch her save the day, but to learn from her. To learn how to embrace our fire, how to trust ourselves, and how to turn "I can't" into "I will." Because if a stubborn village, wisdom from the two rivers, can master the one power and change the world, imagine what you can do. Nynaeve Almira was born with fire in her veins and power in her bones, but for the longest time, she couldn't access either without tripping over her own rage. We're talking about the Fury here, the two rivers wisdom who'd march into a pack of Trollocs with nothing but a dagger and a scowl, yet crumble into frustration when the one power refused to bend to her will. Her early struggle? It's the most relatable mess of strength versus self-sabotage you'll find in the Wheel of Time. And let's break it down like we're sitting in a tavern, swapping stories over a tankard of ale. First, let's talk about her inherent strength, because this woman wasn't just gifted. She could heal people with a touch before she even knew what channeling was. Remember when Matt got stabbed by that Shadar Logoth dagger? Nynaeve patched him up in the woods. No training, no incantations, just raw, unfiltered power pouring out of her. That's the thing about Nynaeve. The one power wasn't something she learned to wield. It was something she was. But here's the catch. It only flowed when she was furious, when she was defending her friends, when she was fighting for what's right, when someone dared to underestimate the village wisdom who thought she belonged in a kitchen, not saving the world. That anger? It was her on switch. But it was also her prison. Let's visualize that first training session in Tar Valon. You know the one. The Aes Sedai have her in a room, telling her to calm her mind, to let the power come to her gently. Nynaeve's jaw is tight, her hands balled into fists, because calm, gentle? That's not how she operates. She's the woman who yells at kings, who cries when her friends hurt, who carries the weight of the two rivers on her shoulders like it's a backpack. So she strains harder and harder, trying to force the power to do what she wants. Her face flushes red, her breath comes in ragged gasps, and for a second, you can see it, a flicker of light, a hum in the air. But then she grits her teeth, thinks "I will control this," and poof, it's gone. Vanished like smoke in the wind. The Aes Sedai shake their heads, muttering about too much passion, not enough discipline, but they don't get it. Nynaeve's not being undisciplined, she's being Nynaeve, and her power doesn't play by Tar Valon's rules. Remember when she and Egwene snuck out to practice by the river? Egwene's channeling is smooth, like water flowing over stones. She's listening, adapting. Nynaeve? She's slamming into the power like a blacksmith hitting iron. She tries to call fire and ends up drenching Egwene with a random burst of water. She tries to weave a shield and accidentally knocks over a tree. This is stupid, she snarls, kicking a rock into the river. Why can't I just make it work? Egwene tries to reason with her. You're fighting it, Nynaeve. Let it breathe. But Nynaeve's not having it. She spent her whole life being the one who fixes things, who takes control, who never lets anyone see her weak. Surrendering to the power, letting it breathe? That feels like failure. No! And failure's not in her vocabulary. Here's the brutal irony. The more Nynaeve tried to control the one power, the more it blocked her. It's like trying to hold water in your fist, squeeze tighter, and it slips away faster. She'd walk into the training yards determined to master it, her mind fixed on rules and rituals and the Aes Sedai's endless lectures about composure. But the second she thought, I can't mess this up, the power clammed up. It only came alive when she forgot to control it. When she was so mad at Moiraine for keeping secrets that she didn't care about doing it right. When she was so scared for Rand's safety that her rage overpowered her self-doubt. Remember that time she faced off against the White Cloaks in Caemlyn? They had Egwene tied up, talking about witchcraft and punishment, and Nynaeve snapped. The ground shook, the air crackled, and suddenly she was weaving fire and earth like she'd been doing it for years, all because her anger was too big to contain. But the second the fight was over, the power vanished again. She'd stare at her hands, confused and frustrated, wondering why the thing that came so easily in battle felt impossible in training. It's not that she lacked strength, she had more than most Aes Sedai combined. It's that she saw the one power as an enemy to be defeated, not a partner to work with. The Aes Sedai taught discipline, but Nynaeve's discipline was rooted in defiance. She thought control meant forcing her will on the world, but the one power doesn't respond to force. It responds to truth, to authenticity, to letting go of the fear that she's not good enough by Tar Valon standards. Let's be real, we've all been there. How many times have you tried to control a situation, a job interview, a relationship, a big goal, only to mess it up because you were so focused on not failing that you forgot to be yourself? Nynaeve's block wasn't just about channeling, it was about self-acceptance. She couldn't wield the power because she couldn't fully embrace who she was, a stubborn, passionate, angry woman who loved too hard and fought too fiercely. Let's talk about that time she got kidnapped by moiraine. Yeah, the forsaken, cold, calculating, the kind of villain who twists your fears against you. Moiraine traps her in a dream world, taunting her about her block, about how her anger makes her weak. You'll never master the power, she smears. Not while you're ruled by your rage. And for a second, Nynaeve believes her. She's sitting there, alone in the dark, thinking about all the times she's failed, all the times she's let her friends down. But then Moiraine makes a mistake. She threatens Egwene. Suddenly, Nynaeve's anger isn't just rage, it's purpose. She stops trying to control the power. She stops fighting her own emotions. She lets that fury rise up, not as a weapon against herself, but as a weapon for the people she loves. And boom, she breaks free. She weaves a shield so strong, it knocks Moiraine on her ass, and for the first time, she's not just channeling, she's commanding. Not because she's calm, not because she's disciplined, but because she's unapologetically Nynaeve. That's the crux of her block. It wasn't anger that held her back, it was her fear of anger. She thought the Aes Sedai were right, that her passion was a flaw, that she needed to fix herself to be powerful. But the truth? Her anger was never the problem. Her refusal to accept it was. The one power didn't want a calm, compliant Nynaeve. It wanted the woman who yells, who cries, who fights like hell for what matters. It wanted the fury. Let's circle back to those early days in Tar Valon, when she'd storm out of training sessions, tears of frustration burning her cheeks. She'd sit on the steps of the White Tower, staring at the city below and think, why can't I be more like Egwene? But here's the thing, Egwene's strength was in her patience. Nynaeve's was in her fire. They didn't need to be the same. They just needed to be themselves. Nynaeve's block was a lesson in that power isn't about fitting into someone else's mold. It's about embracing the parts of yourself you're scared of, the parts you think are too much. By the time she figures that out, she becomes one of the strongest channelers in the world. She heals people. No one else can. She faces down, forsaken without flinching. She leads armies with the same fire that once held her back. But let's not forget those early struggles, the tantrums, the self-doubt, the days she wanted to quit. They're what made her relatable. They're what made her human. Because we've all been there, staring at something we know we're capable of, but letting our own fears and expectations get in the way. Nynaeve's block wasn't just a plot point, it was a mirror. It showed us that our greatest weaknesses can be our greatest strengths, that control is overrated, and that the only way to master something is to stop fighting who you are. So the next time you're stuck, the next time you're trying to force something that just won't budge, think of Nynaeve. Think of the woman who turned her rage into power, her self-doubt into drive, and her stubbornness into strength. Think of her sitting on those white tower steps, frustrated but unbroken. Because if the Fury can overcome her own mind to wield the one power, imagine what you can do when you stop fighting yourself. Nynaeve's block wasn't just some magic glitch. It was a prison she built for herself, brick by brick, out of fear, self-doubt, and the weight of everyone else's expectations. The one power was the key, but the locks, they were all in her head. Let's peel back those layers like we're digging into a campfire story. Raw, messy, and way more relatable than any Aes Sedai lecture on composure. First, let's talk about the emotional roots, because trauma and fear don't just vanish because you're destined to save the world. Nynaeve grew up as the wisdom of Emond's Field, the one everyone ran to when their kid had a fever or their crops failed. She was 17 when she took the job, for light's sake still a kid herself, but suddenly responsible for the lives of an entire village. Remember that time she couldn't save Tamal Thor? Rand's dad was dying, and she knelt over him, hands shaking, trying to heal him, but nothing worked. She blamed herself for weeks, said she wasn't good enough, that she'd let Rand down. That guilt? It stuck to her like tar. Later, when she started channeling, every time she fumbled, that voice in her head screamed, "You're gonna let them die again." Fear of failure wasn't just a feeling, it was a memory. A memory of watching someone she cared about slip away and feeling powerless to stop it. And let's not forget the self-doubt. Nynaeve was the first from the Two Rivers to even touch the one power, let alone train with Aes Sedai. She walked into the White Tower feeling like a fish out of water, no fancy education, no noble blood, just a sharp tongue and a habit of talking back to authority. The other novices whispered about her village manners. The Aes Sedai clucked their tongues about her unrefined power. She'd look at Egwene, who took to channeling like it was breathing, and think, why can't I be more like her? That comparison ate at her. She thought power meant being calm, collected, unshakable, everything she wasn't. So she tried to fake it. She forced a calm smile, bit her tongue when she wanted to yell, and tried to control the power like it was a misbehaving goat. Spoiler, it didn't work. The harder she tried to be someone else, the more the power slipped away. Because self-doubt isn't just doubt, it's a chain. It ties you to the idea that you're not enough. And no amount of force can break that if you don't first believe you're worth untying. Now, let's pile on the societal pressure, because Nynaeve wasn't just fighting her own demons. She was fighting everyone else's expectations. As the wisdom, she was supposed to be infallible. The Two Rivers folk talked about her like she was a goddess in a linen dress. Nynaeve will fix it, Nynaeve knows best. Then, when Moiraine showed up and called her a potential Aes Sedai, suddenly, she had a whole new set of people to disappoint. The Aes Sedai expected her to conform to their rules, to suppress her fire and mature into their version of powerful. The villagers expected her to come home a hero, to protect them from Trollocs and Forsaken and all the scary stuff beyond the ways. She was stuck between two worlds, neither of which let her just be Nynaeve. Remember that time she went back to Emond's Field after training in Tar Valon? The villagers swarmed her, asking for healings, asking for answers, asking her to make everything okay. She smiled and nodded, but inside, she was panicking. She still couldn't channel reliably. She still fumbled more than she succeeded. But she couldn't admit that, not to them, not to the people who thought she hung the moon. So she pushed harder, tried to channel even when her block was screaming at her, and ended up collapsing from exhaustion. That's the thing about pressure. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes you lie to everyone else and to yourself. Nynaeve thought she had to be perfect because everyone else thought she was. But perfection is a lie, and lies make for pretty lousy magic. Now, let's get to the kicker. Her block was way more dangerous than any Trolloc or Forsaken. Let's talk about the time she and Egwene were captured by the seanchan. They're locked in a cage, Egwene's being tortured, and Nynaeve is begging the power to come, pleading with it, screaming at it, but nothing happens. Her block isn't just inconvenient, it's a death sentence. Egwene is suffering, and Nynaeve, the one who's supposed to protect her, can't even channel a spark. That's the horror of psychological chains. They don't just hold you back, they let the monsters win. Another time, she's with Rand in the Waste, and he's being poisoned by the Dark One's touch. She needs to heal him, but her self-doubt flares. What if I make it worse? What if I kill him and the power clams up? Rand is dying, and her own mind is the one holding the knife. External threats? They're easy. You see a Trolloc, you stab it, you see a Forsaken, you channel fire and run. But internal threats? They're invisible. They whisper in your ear when you're tired, when you're scared, when you're already at your breaking point. Nynaeve's block didn't just stop her from channeling, it made her question her entire purpose. She'd look at Rand, Mat, parrot all of them with their fancy prophecies and superpowers and think, what do I even bring to the table? She didn't realize that her flaws, her anger, her stubbornness, her refusal to give up were her superpowers. But her block, it made her blind to that. It made her think she was a liability, not an asset. Let's circle back to that time she faced moiraine in the dream world. The Forsaken didn't just fight her with magic, she fought her with her own fears. Moiraine showed her visions of the two rivers burning, of her friends dying, of Nynaeve standing there powerless. You'll never be strong enough, Moiraine sneered. Your doubt will always be bigger than your power. And for a second, Nynaeve believed her. She sank to her knees, ready to give up. But then she thought of Egwene, of how Egwene had never given up on her even when Nynaeve had given up on herself. She thought of the two rivers, of the people who'd trusted her, who'd loved her, even when she was imperfect. And something snapped. She stopped begging the power. She stopped fighting her fear. She embraced it. She let that fear turn into anger. That anger turned into resolve. And suddenly, boom, the power flooded through her, brighter and stronger than ever. That's the thing about psychological chains. You don't break them by ignoring them. You break them by facing them. Nynaeve's block wasn't just about channeling. It was about accepting that she was allowed to be scared, allowed to doubt herself, allowed to be messy. She didn't have to be the infallible wisdom or the perfect Aes Sedai. She just had to be Nynaeve, stubborn, passionate, scared, and brave enough to keep going, even when her own mind was trying to stop her. By the time she figured that out, her block was gone. Not because she'd fixed herself, but because she'd stopped trying to fix herself. She channeled with anger, with passion, with all the messy emotions the Aes Sedai told her to suppress. And you know what? She became one of the strongest channelers in the world. She healed Rand when no one else could. She faced down Forsaken without flinching. She led armies with the same fire that once held her back. So let's be honest. We've all got our own psychological chains. Maybe it's fear of failure. Maybe it's the weight of everyone else's expectations. Maybe it's the voice in our head that says we're not good enough. Nynaeve's story isn't just about magic. It's about realizing that the only thing holding you back is you. That your fears, your doubts, your flaws, they're not chains. They're fuel. You just have to stop fighting them and start using them. The next time you're stuck, the next time your own block is getting in the way, think of Nynaeve. Think of the girl from the two rivers who turned her fear into power, her self-doubt into drive, and her psychological chains into freedom. Because if she can do it, so can you. And hey, if all else fails, yell at the power. It worked for her.